What's going on, everybody? John Pielli here with another edition of the Pass Ball Show. This is one of my favorite ones because I think the topic I'm going to bring up today is very contentious in the world of sports. When it comes to the four major sports, it's very polarizing. And a lot of times it leads to the GOAT conversation, who is the greatest of all time in the individual sport. But I want to change that a little bit and modify it and say which player in each one of the four major sports changed the game forever or was the most impactful for the game getting changed. And there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but I think in three of the major sports there's one player that significantly changed the game. The last sport we'll leave up for debate. I'm going to start out with the one that I feel is the most influential in all of sports. When this player played in the National Basketball Association, the game changed. It impacted rules changes. This player had so much of an unfair advantage. He basically didn't have to play defense on the other end of the court. And I'm talking about, of course, Wilt Chamberlain. Now, we could talk about the Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant debate. You could talk about guys like Bill Russell and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. A lot of great players have played in the game. When it comes to influential, Steph Curry, certainly changed the three-point shot. Didn't make the decision for all teams that they should shoot threes, but his dominance from behind the arc changed the modern day offense in the National Basketball Association. But I go and I bring up Wilt Chamberlain because there was a player that was just so towering over anybody else, basically was able to put the ball in the basket any way that he wanted to, could set himself up to average 50 points in a season if he wanted to, and probably was so much better than anybody else, it influenced his level of competition. You could say similarly about Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, you could talk about the 6 championships he won in 8 years, all the stuff that was brought about in the Last Dance documentary. When it comes to Michael Jordan, just playing in the NBA is not enough of a challenge. We need something else to motivate him. The first time that really happened was Wilt Chamberlain, and the game of basketball changed for the better, and there was no more overpowering or dominant star in the NBA than when Wilt Chamberlain came in the game. The same thing you could say in Major League Baseball about Babe Ruth. Now, Babe Ruth is basically being cut down now. And if you're talking about the modern day baseball player and all the technology and the steroids and all the enhancements that they have in regards to things that the player of nowadays can do that Babe Ruth couldn't do. Babe Ruth basically brought the home run into Major League Baseball. Not that it didn't exist before, not that there wasn't home runs before Babe Ruth, but the guy out-homered entire teams. He set the Major League Baseball record for the most home runs in one season with 29 in 1919, and then he hit 54 and 60. Basically over doubled the record in a couple years. So when it comes to baseball, you can talk about Shohei Ohtani and what he's doing. The fact that he reminds a ton of people of Babe Ruth, who used to be a pitcher and then became a great hitter. Shohei Ohtani could become that player, could transcend the game to a point where you're like, well, this is the guy that's going to hit 50 home runs, steal 50 bases, is going to get 200 strikeouts in a season. Maybe there is a new breed of Major League Baseball player that comes after Shohei Ohtani. And you could talk about Ted Williams, as great of a hitter as he was. You could talk about Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. So many different players. You could talk about their influence and what they've done to baseball and how they've made the game better. The game never took as much of a jump as it did in the 1920s when Babe Ruth started hitting home runs. So to me, similar to Wilt Chamberlain, which I am open to the Michael Jordan, LeBron James discussion, but it's not about the GOAT. It's not about the greatest of all time. I'm talking about the most influential player that changed each one of these sports to what it is today. And in basketball, that's Wilt Chamberlain. In baseball, that's Babe Ruth. Hockey, to me, there's no doubt. It's Wayne Gretzky. You can talk about Gordie Howe. You can talk about the history of hockey going back to the early 1900s, the original six. When Wayne Gretzky got on the ice and started playing for the Edmonton Oilers in the 1980s, it was something you'd never seen before. This guy was outscoring entire teams. This guy was getting 200 points a season. He was breaking records for most goals and most assists in individual seasons year after year. And this happened in the 1980s. Babe Ruth was the 1920s. Wilt Chamberlain was the 1960s. You're talking about the 1980s. A sport in hockey which probably to that point is about 100 years old. Hadn't had a player to basically make the sport his daddy or become the daddy to its sport, like Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky dominated hockey to a point where you've seen nobody that's done it since. Alex Ovechkin more than likely may pass Gretzky's goal record, but he didn't assist anywhere near on as many goals as Wayne Gretzky did. Didn't score anywhere near as much points in a season. Didn't take the National Hockey League by storm and change it to where it can never go back like Wayne Gretzky did. But it leads me to the one sport that I don't think has had a player that has done what Wilt Chamberlain did to basketball, what Babe Ruth did to baseball, and what Wayne Gretzky did to hockey. And that's the National Football League. The National Football League has been blessed with over 100 years of solid play. Certainly, we look back, we look at the last 55 years or so of the Super Bowl era as really the time that we focus on and we think about in modern day National Football League. Who is the equivalent? And I want to throw that out to you, the listener, the viewer. Who would you say that is in professional football? Because you could say Tom Brady, and the amount of Super Bowls that he won. Yeah, nobody else has won 7 Super Bowls. Nobody else likely ever will again. But that's like the Bill Russell argument in basketball. Bill Russell won 11 NBA championships in 13 seasons. He didn't change the game. Sure, nobody's ever going to win 11 NBA championships. But did he change the game the way Wilt Chamberlain did? And that's what I'm looking for. And I don't know if Tom Brady changed the NFL the way the other 3 players I mentioned, Chamberlain, Ruth, Gretzky, did. Jim Brown is interesting because Jim Brown's dominance in the 50s and the 1960s was something that pro football hadn't seen before. You saw the likes of Gale Sayers. Lenny Moore was very good, but what Jim Brown was able to do on a football field was something that really hadn't been seen yet. Otto Graham, dominant quarterback, the numbers that he put up over the course of his career with the Cleveland Browns. So Jim Brown, Otto Graham, they're kind of the ones that I think are the closest. The other one is the whole Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith discussion. Players that hold the records for most receptions, most rushing yards. Quarterback, you could say, Tom Brady with all the records that he holds, plus the Super Bowls. And then I also think of Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor played as a defensive player, dominated, caused more havoc than anybody that the game had seen before. So I'm actually going to conclude the show today with a little poll. And it's going to be kind of 4 answers. Which player transcended the National Football League the same way Wilt Chamberlain did for the National Basketball Association, Babe Ruth did for Major League Baseball, and Wayne Gretzky did for the National Hockey League? Do you go with Tom Brady? Do you go with Jim Brown or Otto Graham? Do you go with Jerry Rice or Emmitt Smith? Do you go with Lawrence Taylor? Or is there somebody else that's on your mind? Past Ball Show, you can follow if you want. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, videos on YouTube. We'll be back with you soon. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.
not going to go in the past.
Two times.